what's happening, everybody. Welcome to Each Chat podcast. Your host, uh, yeah, Cody today. We have very, very informative host. Just want to stress the bias there in that what the play on what dynamic and our welcome testimony to bring women and the fact that there is life, there is something for the trauma, there's support out. We got to break barriers and talk about this. And then we start saying that is one thing about sexual violence, number of violence, and a lot of times it's like we want to like this talk about these these how much we still and this is how and this is the stories we also recognize the red flag. So out of this green, but we're not red flags in many people. So first I want to talk about your field as people dynamic, how the people advocate for the things that the things that the stories from the God and the closer they have to be closer and as well as the as well as after well and I want to tell a little bit about who they are. And then we're going to get into some very deep conversation and talk about some subjects that a lot of people are comfortable about. But we don't want you to be uncomfortable today. We want you to be very comfortable. So I'm just going to start with therapist Dana Bell. Dana, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. So thank you so much for joining us. Can you just tell the people that are watching a little bit about yourself, the type of therapy that you engage in, and we're going to get into people's stories later, but I want them to know who you are first.
Okay. I am a therapist at Family Matters Counseling Center. I am also a parole agent with the Department of Corrections, and that's where I got my training with working, facilitating veterans intervention classes.
That is awesome. And if anybody is violated, uh, don't put your real name in the chat right now, okay? Next, we have Dr. Monique Tucker. Dr. Tucker, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm awesome. I want to thank you first for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. And you're a clinical psychologist, correct?
Yes, I too work at Family Matters with Dana. Dana and I work together.
All right.
I am also an author coach. I do uh, corporate trainings. I also do self development trainings. So I'm all about helping build yourself to become a better person.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And we're going to get deeper into what you do in this conversation. Jennifer Wilson, if you could just chime in for us, take yourself off mute, introduce yourself to the people, and then we're going to get to your story. Because I heard your story and it just brought me to tears, but not in a way of pity, but just in a way of, my God, how strong you are and what you have overcome. So, Jennifer Wilson, tell us a little bit about yourself. Jennifer, I think you're muted. So what we're going to do, Janelle, why don't you unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into your story?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, Chief, for having me on your show. I really do appreciate the invitation. I'm Janelle Thomas. I am a Director of Employee Relations for Instacart and an Employee Investigations Consultant for Nike, Jordan, and Converse. I am a domestic violence victor, not a victim
Absolutely.
anymore.
I
I'm
love
a
that.
survivor.
I love
I'm here to have an opportunity to share my story because I constantly have been told, oftentimes women, we are silenced.
it.
And that is a path that I want to help women to no longer sit in that space of silence and or feel like they have to, and that we
Absolutely.
need to speak out more to bring more awareness to domestic violence. So thank you for
Absolutely.
having me here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So everybody's a little tight right now, so I want y'all to loosen up because we gonna dive in, and I know there's gonna be some dynamism in this conversation, even though it's a very very serious subject, something that we probably don't like to talk about, but the best disinfectant to anything is sunshine. We're gonna bring some light to the situation. So I'll tell you from my experience as chief of police, or former chief of police, and a law enforcement practitioner, and as a pastor, one thing that I notice people do is sometimes they try to shame victims. For instance, you're a professional. You don't need a man. How do you get tied up in something like that? Why don't you just walk away? And those are the kind of questions that they irk me, being a survivor of an assault as a youth. That bothers me when you blame the person that's victimized. So just let's do a round robin, and I'll start with Dr. Tucker, just from the clinical side. What are some of the dynamics that go into the trauma that a domestic violence victim experiences?
So for one, just as Janelle said, they're first taught to be quiet about it, right?
Yes. Hmm.
The other dynamic is that we are embarrassed. So we disassociate ourselves from our family. We
Hmm.
also carry this image around that we're not good enough.
Okay.
So when you have those type of dynamics, we also have trauma from our past, right?
Right.
Some of
Right.
us seen our parents, grandparents, relatives go through the same situations, and so those past traumas would be a dynamic within your relationships. And
Right.
sometimes we don't understand that that's where that's coming from, and we grow up with this mentality that it's going to get better. This is normal. This is uh,
Right.
this is something that wouldn't affect me. I didn't think this could happen to me. So all those
Mhm.
types of dynamics is included when I see clients.
Doc, can you just very briefly touch on trauma bonding? And because you talked about past experiences and your trauma from the past, and how sometimes that contributes to who we date, who we're in relationships with, and it could be an unhealthy codependence, that we don't even realize the trauma mechanism that draws us to someone.
So trauma is something that happens to us that sticks with us, right?
Mhm.
So you may have, like I said, experienced some trauma with your family members, with your mom, with your dad, grandmother, auntie, uncle, and you at the time just think that this is a normal thing, right? So as you get older, you get into these relationships, and I mean when I say relationships, I say
Mhm.
ships across the board because
Right.
the shit with your mom, with your uncle, with your dad, with your cousin, those are all ships. Doesn't
Right.
necessarily have to be a relationship with
Mhm.
a domestic partner. And I
Right.
think that you get that confused sometimes too, because you can be you can have trauma with your brother, with your
Yes.
sister. You're fighting all the time. You don't understand where that comes from. We don't understand each other. And that's because that's what I experienced as a child. So
Right.
trauma happens a lot of times. Like I said, it comes from when we're a child, and we don't know that we're experiencing it in our first relationships with our parents, with our siblings. And
Right.
so it is hard for us to understand when we say, where does this come from?
Mhm.
I've never been in an abusive relationship. I don't even know how this started. It
Right.
started way back, when you were a child and the things that you have seen. And it didn't have to necessarily be your parents. It could be your friends' parents.
That's
But
true. It could
you
be late.
experienced,
Right.
right? So that's
Mhm.
where the trauma comes from.
Okay.
And it's
And
just
that
helping
is
them to understand to deal with it.
and your
Process.
environment has a lot to do with your frame of mind and how you view the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Janelle, Janelle, I want to pivot to you. You speak very openly and very heroically about some challenges that you've had in that area. Can you just give people an appreciation of who you are and what was the line that you drew, or when did you start to realize that the relationship was starting to move into an abusive direction?
Um, well, my story is very recent.
Mhm.
Over the last year, I got married
Okay.
to a man that I seen the signs
Hmm.
and I ignored them because I loved them
Yes.
and I had a greater appreciation for how I felt that I could do better in his life as well as mine.
Hmm.
So I forgave my abuser and took him back
Hmm.
from incident that happened 5 years ago.
Okay.
I would have never thought that going into a marriage and trying to work towards getting to that point that I would be met with the same traumas that I had 5 years ago. And that was my trauma bond. In
Hmm.
my mind, I thought maybe I can fix him.
Right. Right.
Maybe I can help him. Or I'm such a healer, I'm such a giver. Maybe he'll see the light in me and he'll desire and be inspired to change.
Wow.
Well,
And that's a
always
dynamic
thought
point.
that we wrestle not against flesh and blood.
Right.
There are
Mhm.
spiritual beings that I couldn't fight. I
Yes.
was literally 3 months into my marriage
Hmm.
and decided, there it is. This is
Right.
the same situation you was in 5 years ago with the exact same individual that you pressed charges against, that you followed all the process, and
Hmm.
here you are repeating your own traumas again. So 3 months into my marriage, I saw abuse to
Right.
the point where the police were at the marital home.
Janelle, let me ask this question because this your answer could really help somebody that is in a situation and they're ashamed to talk about it. And I marvel at your strength and your ability to just be very frank about your situation and what led to it. What kind of advice would you give to someone that is in a similar position? You're a woman of God. You're a prayerful woman. You believe in the power of forgiveness. Um, all those things play into how we interact with people. Was Let me ask this: how did your faith or did religion have anything to do with your approach towards forgiveness and giving that person a chance, in spite of the red flags that you had witnessed?
Well, Chief, I have to say I'm not perfect. Even
No, none of us.
as
Absolutely.
I even though I prayed, even
Mhm.
though I sat in my prayer closet, even though I talked to other sisters in the church, I had to build a support system around me that I can trust
Mhm.
to go to and tell them.
Yes.
Because that fear set in that what if something happens to me and my story is not my own?
Yes.
And if I don't write it down, tell
Mhm.
my kids who were living in the home with me that saw it, I didn't want them to be in a place of not telling because we're taught what goes on in the home stays in the home.
Right.
I taught them, no, you tell. Because if I'm not here to tell it, somebody got to know the truth. I
Yes.
put a system around me of people that when I was ready to say, okay, I got to move forward and get out of this situation, that I knew that those people were not going to shun me,
Right.
not going to tell me I'm lying, or look at him and say, oh, no, you all look so great on pictures. That picture is for a moment.
Right.
They don't see what's happening behind closed doors when it's just you and that individual, because that person will put a whole nother image up in front. And I begin to wear a mask.
Right. Right.
I begin to be the person smiling in the picture and saying,
Mhm.
no, this is not what I think it is. This couldn't happen to me. I'm a corporate executive. I begin to tell myself all these false stories of the truth. And I would just constantly say, no, deal with reality, deal with reality. And in doing that, I think it made me feel like I was becoming my own heroine.
Right. Right.
I had to become heroic.
Hmm.
I became hyper vigilant.
Hmm.
Anytime that I saw a sign, I was ready to fight back
Yes.
physically, mentally, emotionally. There's so many different layers that took place with me in a matter of months that I was shocked that it was mental abuse, emotional abuse, constant verbal abuse. Then it went to the physical abuse, then the financial abuse. Every layer hit me all at one time. But I
Wow.
knew I had to tell somebody and have people know just in case something went wrong in my
Yes.
home and no one knew.
That's a powerful, powerful testimony. Dana, if you could, from a therapeutic standpoint, as you listen to Janelle's story, I want to hear Jennifer's story as well. What do you hear as a therapist? How do you talk to people to get them comfortable enough to realize, number one, that there is help out there, and number two, that that's not love. Abuse is not love. In some instances, and I remember we had a conversation on a panel about women not wanting to be their grandmothers and some of the codependency that our grandparents may have had on each other, where grandma stayed because he controlled the money. Because all domestic violence is not physical, there's mental manipulation as well. There's control. isolation from people that you love that would speak life into you and encourage you to go away. Uh, Dana, can you talk to us a little bit about some of those dynamics?
Sure. So, what I heard Janelle say is that she wanted to fix the situation.
Mhm,
She cared for him, she loved him, and that is how women are socialized. That's how we are conditioned.
mhm.
Excuse me. So, when you're in a domestic violence situation, you're trying to get it back to the feel good of
Right.
the relationship.
Mhm.
So you are explaining away some of those dynamics,
Yes.
um, hold the withdrawal of the money, him
Mhm.
holding the money, you having to ask for money, even though you work,
Right.
he's still controlling the money.
Mhm.
um, One thing that we have to remember is domestic violence in those instances is about total control and
Yes.
power
Mhm.
in that relationship.
Mhm.
So, what I try to tell my clients is, would you treat somebody the way that you're being treated? Do you see that as being kind, generous, loving? And first and foremost, I want them to understand that it's not their fault.
Right.
This
Right.
is not because you did something good. Wrong. This,
Wrong. Right.
this is not because you said something and he wanted you to be quiet.
Mhm.
That's not what this is.
Right.
Um, but again, because of the conditioning that we have, well, if you be quiet, if you had his dinner ready, those types of things, and you have to help them understand that the trauma, as Dr. Tucker said, it is remembered through the body.
Right.
Um, you get a trigger off of, well, it's 4 o'clock, dinner should be ready at 4:30, let me hurry up and do this.
Yes.
um, they have to have a strong sense of self-awareness,
Yes.
self-love. Their self-image has to be changed in regards to how they see themselves in this relationship, and they need to understand the dynamics of it with the isolation, the emotional abuse, using others
Right.
to have that control. And when I say using others, I mean them using the kids, the
Yes.
pets, other family members,
Mhm.
to maintain the power and control in that relationship.
Yes. So I want to pivot to Jennifer. Jennifer, are you off mute now? Because I'd love to hear.
Oh, I'm on mute. I took myself off mute when you called my
Okay,
name.
great.
Good afternoon, everybody. I can
Good
hear everything.
afternoon. Okay, great.
Um,
Jennifer, I want you to just take a few minutes to give the people a backstory of your relationship and some of the dynamics, some of the red flags, and then what gave you the courage to get out of your situation and to be the strong advocate that you are now.
first, let me say thank you for having me today. As I'm sitting here and listening to everything that's been said, trauma bonding was something that I didn't experience
Okay.
because everything happened at one time.
Okay.
Um, those layers that Janelle talked about
Mhm.
is that power and control wheel.
Okay.
So 8 months into my marriage, that's when he started to reveal those abusive type behaviors that everybody has described. So my experience was one of suddenly.
Okay.
And so everything happened at once, the attack happened at once, and I was in so much of a shock that I couldn't believe, like, we'd only been married for 8 months.
Right.
Now, we dated for a year and a half, and none of these signs ever surfaced.
Okay.
The control, none of that. It was always, oh my God, he's a gentleman. Oh my God, he's calm. You know, he talks very well.
Okay.
And one of the things that I learned while living in the shelter, because I ended up having to stay at Haven Shelter
Okay.
for a couple of months. For me, you only got one time.
Right.
So for me, it took me a minute to get out of that state of shock.
Yes.
Because I'm like, I can't believe this is the same man who said, I'm not going to treat you like the other guys treated you. And this was my third marriage.
Wow. Okay.
So this was not my first marriage. So he would often say that I'm not that guy. But sitting in the hospital, that was the phrase that kept coming to me.
Yes.
You are that guy. Actually,
Right.
you're worse than that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it wasn't a issue of trauma bonding because I never experienced that. In my mind, I'm like, okay, what is my next move?
Yes.
I talked to my sister. Janelle's my sister.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to my sister the next day when they were getting ready to release me from the hospital. And her first comment to me was, whatever you decide,
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with. Whatever you want to do, I'm okay with. But you got to make the choice and the decision. Are you going to go back or are you going to leave?
Oh, yeah, right.
And for me, it was just, I had already been through so much to previous relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my mind, I'm like, okay, I can't deal with this. So I got to figure out how to get out. So
Right.
that was my strength to make that decision to say, how do I get out at any cost? And so it was my sister that actually told me go to the shelter because I wasn't going to go at first.
Okay. So, Dr. Tucker, I want you to chime in because I heard a couple of things that piqued my curiosity. Jennifer said he didn't show anything. He was a perfect gentleman. And, everything was okay until 8 months into the marriage. Can you talk a little bit about love bombing and the dynamics of that and the manipulation of an abuser?
Absolutely. So this is also some of the training that the shelter provides to learn all of this, which is I'm so grateful for.
Yes.
So that love bombing is they'll be nice.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he used to do, he used to always buy me flowers.
Okay.
So that was every week.
Mm-hmm.
But then it began to be a source of manipulation. So when I started seeing the behavior where he would raise his voice or get upset because I didn't want to go where he wanted me to go, or he would get upset because I didn't want him to go to the grocery store with me.
Mm-hmm.
I shared a very personal situation, intimate moment with him that only my family knew. And he flipped that and used that against me and tried to make it seem like, oh, I'm just concerned about your safety.
Oh,
so
wow.
There's a thin line between safety and a thin line between obsession.
Yes.
So it became obsession. And once I started noticing that, I'm a woman of God as well. I said, okay, God, something ain't right here. I need you to show me what's going on.
Right.
And I believe in the power of prayer. And there was an incident actually at the house. My sister came over. They had just got engaged.
Okay.
And he wanted to do this big dinner. And I said, okay, that's fine. So he brings the flowers in front of my sister because, again, like she said, the family members, they want to make it seem like to your family, like, oh no, this is not what's happening. This is not what's going on. Right. And my sister knows me. I'm a real calm, laid back person. But if I get to the point where I'm snapping, something's wrong.
Something's wrong. Okay.
So she knew. She's like, okay, something ain't right. So when I started noticing that, yes, that's when I started seeing the behavior change. And that's where that love bombing started to come into play. Now the flowers no longer became something that was endeared to me. It became something that was a tool of manipulation. Oh, well, I'll just buy her some flowers. I'll get her a card and she'll be all right. Or I'll get her a gift and she'll be all right. So I got to the point I said, don't buy me nothing else.
Right.
I don't want anything.
Now, were the gifts at that point starting to become triggering?
They did. So and that's where that love bombing started happening.
So I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to hear. I'd love to hear from all of you on this point. And I say this: ordained minister or pastor, serving one of the greatest churches on the planet, Triumph Church, one of the greatest pastors on the side of glory, Pastor Solomon Kinlock, and I love how we approach those things from a theological standpoint. But the church proper, the church in general, and particularly the Black church, have we done a disservice to some members that have been abused by suggesting that, baby, just hang in there like your grandmother did, just hang in there like your mother did, as if longevity makes up for the abuse, as if longevity is a proof that the relationship is good. Tell me where you all feel pressures from church people for you to stay in those situations, just pray for them. Has that been anybody's experience, or have you witnessed that?
Can I go first?
Yes, please.
I witnessed that
Mhm.
very much so on multiple occasions. I serve in my church.
Mhm.
I'm a jurisdictional adjutant.
Okay.
I serve at a lot of different capacities. I
Mhm.
actually had a first lady friend of mine tell me, "Well, are you sure you don't want to go back?" You know, a lot of women, we counsel them and
Mhm.
they go back. And
Okay.
this was said to me on multiple occasions to the point where I had to tell her. Now we were very close friends, been friends over 20 years.
Yes.
I had to verbally say, why would I go back to someone who just tried to kill me?
That's a
And then,
powerful question.
and she couldn't answer. She got
Mhm.
quiet. So
Yes.
I would say yes. Some churches, I'm not going to put all churches
No,
in that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Some churches have done a disservice, and I have heard those words. Oh, well, we going to pray for you,
Mhm.
or just pray about it.
Yeah.
And I am of the frame of thought, and
Mhm.
Dr. Anita Hollis says this. Anita Phillips, I'm sorry. She
Mhm.
says prayer plus therapy is the best strategy.
That's there. It is. There it is.
So had I not been going to therapy before I had that conversation with that first lady, I might have had a different response. But I myself,
Yes.
my personal relationship with God, because that comes into play too,
Yes.
had to ask myself, God,
Mhm.
what do you say?
Yes.
And it ain't in nowhere in the word
Mhm.
where God say it's okay to get your behind whooped.
It's
I'm
not.
sorry.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I'm so glad, Jennifer, that you addressed it that way, because there's a lot of pressure, and the thing that concerns me is that a lot of times we say, let's pray about it, and then you send them right back into that same environment, and that is not helpful at all, because it creates a belief that you're going to change that person. And Lord knows I don't limit God at all. I know God can do anything but fail. But the abuser has to want to change. And if you're trying to manipulate change on one side of the equation, and then expect that person to go back into an abusive situation, I have a lot of problems with that. I don't know if that's my police indoctrination, but Jennifer, I'm with you. God doesn't require us to be beat. As a matter of fact, the Bible says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church," and Christ never beat the church. Christ never cheated on the church. Christ never manipulated the church. Christ gave his life for the church. So if a man is not doing that and tries to use religion as a manipulation to keep you in that relationship, I defy him to do that and be in line with the word of God. Please, Mel, Dana, please chime in on this one, because I think this is very important, because spirituality in the Black community is very strong. We're very spiritual people, but I think somebody probably needs a release in their spirit, and I think you all can speak some words that will give some women courage to challenge that. I think you're on mute, Janelle.
I'm sorry. I experienced it directly myself. It's not just from people in the church,
Right.
but people in your circle that are firm believers in God too,
Mhm.
but given unwise counsel.
Yes.
And including the abuser who decides to pick certain scriptures from the Bible to manipulate you with those scriptures to make you think and believe that you are sinning, you're not a
Right.
good wife, you're not a good partner, you're not committed to the relationship, and scriptures about love never fails,
Right.
or scriptures about wives submit yourselves to your husbands.
Mhm.
But what about the scriptures that say husbands love your wives long before you get to the submission part?
Yes. Absolutely.
But I mean, even the abuser will use scripture against you.
Yes.
Um,
And Janelle, that is so important to point out, because scripture is not to be utilized for that reason. It's for instruction, it's for correction, all things, but it's not for manipulation. And a lot of people in the body have some bad behaviors and try to justify those behaviors by selectively picking out scriptures. So thank you so much for bringing that up and pointing those nuances out, because it can really push you to a point where you're really challenging somebody's literal life, and we don't want anybody to lose their life under a false predicate of that they were doing a spiritual thing when it certainly was not a God thing. I want to pivot a little bit more and stay in this vein. And
Can I can I just
what
make
I
a comment, Chief?
oh please, 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 Doc.
I just want to comment when you asked the question, do you think the church has done a disservice?
Hmm.
And I would say absolutely. And here's why I'm saying that. I'm saying
Hmm.
that because, like, right now, I feel like the churches are being more aware of how
Hmm.
important mental health is. But
Yes.
prior to the, and abuse has been going on forever.
Oh,
Just like we
absolutely.
have other mental illness
Hmm.
disorders, diseases, and those types of things aren't talked about in the church, right? It is just prayer. We gonna pray
Yes.
about it, and God will take the demon out of you. He will change your mind, and all
Right.
of that, right?
Hmm.
And so, just like Jennifer was saying, that prayer and therapy works, and I don't think we do
Yes.
enough of, in the pulpit of saying that I
Right.
am your minister, I am your pastor. I can only do
Hmm.
so much because this is what God gave me the gift is to
Yes.
do. But the
Absolutely.
next thing that you need is therapy because they also have skills and tools to be able to help you to change your mindset from the situation that you're in. And I think the
Yes.
church, because we have been so, and that's the
Hmm.
past, with our grandmothers and those type of churches, is that church is what's going to heal you. Prayer is what's going to heal you. You don't need outside help. Just like they told us to keep everything in house when we're in the house, everything stays in
Hmm.
the house. It was just like that with the church. You don't need
Yes.
outside help. You just
Hmm.
need prayer. And if you get prayer, it'll change everything. And
Yes.
prayer works. Don't get me wrong, because I'm like you said, I am a firm believer of God.
Yes.
I worship. I also do things in church, but my thing is I just have even in my church, my
Yes.
pastor and I are now working together so that we can do something with mental health because suicide
Yes.
is a real thing as well. And people
It
don't
is very.
understand that the
Mhm.
pastor can only do so much. You need to
Yes.
talk to somebody with the skill.
Absolutely. And Doc, to that point, and I've said this often, and particularly in Black and Brown communities where mental health awareness is not as heightened as it should be, and then just in general, there's still stigmas around mental health awareness, and from the neck down, I don't care how spiritual somebody is. I mean, they'll get oil poured on them by the bishop. They'll have hands laid on them. They'll fall out
Absolutely.
and they'll receive the word of God, and then they'll still go to an oncologist if they got cancer. They'll still go to a cardiologist if they have heart disease. Yet from the neck up, we discourage people from going to get mental help for trauma, because trauma is really a bruise on your brain. I mean, your brain is hurt, and it's the most important organ in your body not to tend to, even when you're healthy. Getting a checkup sometimes. So, Dana, as a therapist and a case manager, uh, sometimes people say, "Well, I want a Christian therapist, or I want a Christian psychologist." Can you just both talk to your experiences there as practitioners first?
Um, yes. First, I want to say something in regards to the prayer
Hmm.
and therapy.
Yes.
Yes, prayer is powerful, and we as therapists, yes, we are a tool
Hmm.
to assist anyone that comes with uh, whatever whatever components that they're dealing with,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
Be it anxiety, domestic violence, grief, low self esteem.
Yes.
However, the most important part is each person has to do the work.
Yes. Yes.
We can give them exercises, we can give them all types of different tools, but each person has to do the work. And I
Absolutely.
think that that component is what's missed with the understanding of therapy.
Hmm.
They think that they're going to come to therapy and we fix them, or we're going to make them even more anxious.
Right.
But no, you have to, with prayer, you're praying, but God is expecting you to do some work after that. You
Right.
have a duty to yourself,
Hmm.
to Him, right? So it's not just a miracle blanket that's
Right.
going to be laid. No, there is some work to be done. So now, um, when potential clients
Hmm.
call or when they come in and they want a Christian therapist,
Hmm.
I'm there right there with them. I go off of what they bring.
Mhm.
They may not be a Christian, they
Right.
may be Muslim,
Mhm.
but okay, we're going to follow what are your practices?
Right.
What do you understand about the word? And if they have a understanding of, like what Jennifer
Mhm.
and Janelle said, that they need to stay in the marriage,
Yes.
okay, well, let's go with that.
Mhm.
Let's go with what your understanding is. Let's break that down.
Mhm.
I'm not changing your mind. I
Right.
want you to process it.
Mhm.
So, does the word tell you to do that?
Mhm.
Stay in a situation where you're being harmed,
Right.
where your children will be harmed in front of you? Is that how the way that they are utilizing money?
Right.
Is that the way money is utilized in the Bible? Let's break it down.
Exactly.
So I do believe that everyone has to understand that we are accountable for ourselves. Um, However, there is a component where you do have to understand where the abuser, where they're coming from. Nothing, no good thing that you do can change that person. They're making a conscious decision to enforce
Mhm.
violence or isolation or strip you from your funds, strip you from your connections with the community. They're
Yes.
making a conscious decision to do that. It's not happenstance. It's not Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Mhm.
So, um,
That's a great point. And Janelle, I think you brought this up during the panel discussion a couple of weeks ago. It's amazing how the abuser is selectively abusive. They're not abusive to their boss at work. They're not abusive to their boys that they hang out with.
right.
But all of a sudden, they get this courage bomb at home and want to dominate their mate. Janelle, talk a little bit about that, because when you brought that up, I just thought it was so dynamic when you talked about that.
Well, it's truth to it. And Dana, thank you so much for pointing it out that these are choices.
Mhm.
My abuser abused drugs.
Mhm.
My abuser excessively drank alcohol to the point where I know it's an addiction when you got multiple DWIs. That's
Right.
alcohol abuse.
Hmm.
I walked in looking at my abuser shoot himself with steroids.
Hmm.
And I knew I'm going to meet that rage
Right.
because I know what steroids can do to the body.
Hmm.
I wanted to attribute it to I need to help him. I need to get him some. We need some help in another area
Hmm.
of substance abuse.
Yes.
Not that he has all these other demonic things going on that I struggled with.
Hmm.
Um, Dana, girl, I love you because in my mind I kept saying it's the drugs,
Yeah.
it's the alcohol,
Hmm.
it's something else. It's not.
Hmm.
It was the choices that individual made to say I'm going to abuse you. And because I said I do to you, you have no choice but to accept it.
Right. Right.
And that is the state of fear that
Hmm.
I was placed in by controlling and dominating me because I said I do. I now have no other choice. But I
Yes.
never thought about it. The years of dating and courtship,
Hmm.
that love bombing again, that charismatic person that said, no, I'm going to marry you. I'm going to take care of your kids and you. It
Yes.
didn't happen. And my children were in my home and subjected to it and saw it.
Hmm.
And they were traumatized. So now
Yes.
I got to deal with the traumas of my kids,
Mhm.
my own traumas, and the weight and burden of trying to help an individual that I said I love.
Right.
On top of it, I'm going through breast cancer at the same time. So I
Wow.
had all of this happening to me, and I'm still trying to cover it up because I
Yes.
thought it was the substance abuses that made that person decide this is the person that I now have in my hand and in my control. I can now expose and show her who I really am, and there's nothing she can do about it.
Yes. So I want to do this because I want people to understand very clearly, especially to our survivors on the panel. These are not victims; they're victors. They have the inner strength and fortitude to be able to tell their story, but they're definitely overcomers. Jennifer, can you talk about your advocacy and some of the things you do to help other women that may be in a similar situation, other families? Because as we discussed earlier, domestic violence is not just a male female relationship issue, it's a family dynamic. It's in the
Right.
LGBTQ community. It's in other communities. It's a violative crime of control and manipulation. So, Jennifer, tell us a little bit about your advocacy and some of the things you're doing to help other women that are in similar situations.
Well, I've partnered with Haven, the shelter where I was staying. So I'm now a part of their speakers bureau.
Okay.
So any organization, any group that needs someone to come talk to, I don't care if it's one person, because also I'm a life coach as well.
Okay.
And I help process through. Sometimes, like I had a client yesterday, dating a guy. This is just an example. But the whole conversation, she's trying to tell herself why she should still be talking to this guy. So these are the things that we tell ourselves. It's the negative self-talk, or it's trying to tell ourselves, I like him, but he doesn't meet this need. And I'm telling her, you're already answering your own question within your question. So that's important to, like my sister said, building that support system.
Yes.
Having a village that you can bounce things off of, that's going to hold you accountable. So I'm an accountability partner.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter who you are, where you are in the world. I will get on a Zoom. I will get on Google Meet. I will get on whatever to help as many people as I can. So I am a advocate in any way I can possibly help. I also sit on Haven's Advisory Council, where we look at the policies and the laws. And this is another piece that's very important. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak at a silent witness event at Henry Ford Health Hospital in Bloomfield Hills. And so one of the things that chief of police shared with me is the language in the laws and how that needs to be looked at, and it needs to be focused on as it relates to the percentage of bail, the percentage of that's given, that the judge gives when someone is accused, not making it so low. So these are the things and the conversations that I'm now involved in, that I want to affect and look at how can we change the laws. So I'm in the process of working on writing a federal policy against domestic violence, because one does not exist federally. From my understanding, you can correct me, Chief, it's state to state and county to county.
Nope, you're absolutely right. There's no federal jurisdiction over domestic violence cases. And
can I add to that, Chief, that even when you think about the stories of people who are not here to tell it, like all of us, we can see each other who are here to tell it. If you ever been to a domestic violence commemoration event, those people are dead.
Yes.
They stayed, and it cost them their life. It cost them the lives of their children, and sometimes the pet.
Yes.
In recent cases. And you hear all the stories, but what you hear is they had a history of domestic violence, and the court did not act. They didn't take action. They followed every story I heard yesterday, 19, 20 people.
Yes.
We're putting candles down for them now. So going to get a PPO, sometimes that works in your favor, sometimes it don't. It's just a piece of paper.
Yes.
It's nothing you can do. There are people who just didn't have the wherewithal with them to even go file the PPO, because that is lack of support there too. Then you have your abusers who go on to the next person, and the next woman gets victimized and they don't know. Check that man's police record.
Yes.
He might, or she, it's not just men only.
True. That's true.
The women's police record too. Before you engage in these type of relationships, there is such a thing, and you'll tell us, it's called FOIA.
Yes.
Freedom of Information Act. You can pull up anybody's arrest record to see exactly what they've been accused of, whether they've been charged or not. It gives you a seed of information before you move forward in that deeper relationship.
So FOIA won't do that for you exactly, but you always go to Otis. When I tell women that are dating all the time, go to it's the Offender Tracking Information System. And if someone has been incarcerated in the state of Michigan, they will be in that system, and you can see what crime they were convicted of. If you have not been convicted of a crime, those things are not public information, but there is information you can find out there. And I want to do this real quickly, because there's a word that has been floating around, and sometimes words become trendy, like toxic Um, but one that really is big and seems to have some nexus to some abusive behaviors is narcissism. So, for our clinicians, can you all tell us a little bit about narcissism? I think we overuse it and try to categorize everybody as that. But I think it's important to add context to this conversation as well. Dr. Tucker, can you tell us a little bit about narcissism and what are some of the things that are we that may be dating or in relationships or friendships, some triggers or red flags we should look for?
So a lot of triggers. One of the triggers and red flags is this most important is it's about them all the time, right?
Okay.
It's always about them. It's
Mhm.
never about you, and I'm going to make it about me, even when it's about you, right?
Mhm.
You embarrass me. You're not thinking of what people are going to think about me,
Right.
and then they have this is the control.
Yes.
Narcissist is being in control. So those are the main two components, and the thing is that we all have that. We all have it in us to be that
Right.
person, right?
Right.
It
Mhm.
is just learning who you are and understanding where you are to and affecting people in that type of way to sit back with yourself and say, I don't want to become what I don't like. It's one of my
Yes.
famous sayings.
Mhm.
Don't become what you don't like, right? We do it
Right.
all the time. We feel like, oh, I'm not going to be like this person. And then I kind of check you and be like, are you doing the same thing? Like,
Right.
yeah,
Mhm.
yes, I am. Right. Because we always think that we're different from someone else. And I just
Mhm.
quickly want to bring up when we talk about choices. I
Yes.
actually was in a domestic violence relationship twice. The first
Okay.
one was physical, the second one was emotional. The reason
Mhm.
why I got into the second one emotionally because I said, oh, I'm not going to be with somebody that hit me, but then I got with somebody that was cheating on me, right? So it became emotional abuse for me. And then guess who became the abuser? I did. I started to hit, I started to,
Mhm.
because I was angry at the way he was treating me and what I didn't know, the trauma that
Mhm.
triggered me from the first relationship, right? And so then that's how we get to the second and the third and the fourth, and we
Mhm.
continue to go on these paths. But we too have a choice. When we
Yes.
said the abuser has a choice, we have a choice as women. And when you first see the signs, like we all say, it was signs there, but we
Right.
didn't make a choice to say, you know what, I saw this before, and I'm
Yes.
not going to, I'm not going to allow myself to be here. But we'll say the abuser, we're like, oh, well, he should have known, and he needs this and he needs that. And so
Right.
when you say advocacy, I'm more about telling us and helping us to see as women and men that's victims,
Yes.
what part am I playing in this? What do
Yes.
I need to do? Right? Because a lot of times we're not looking at that. We got to
That's
look at ourselves. And like I'm saying, the trauma sits deep. And if we're not
yes.
looking at ourselves, we become what we don't like. And that's a part of narcissism as well. Like I
Yes.
only
That's
did it because he did that. I only did it
mhm.
because they did that. If they wouldn't
Right.
have did this, then I wouldn't have did that. But you have a choice.
Yes. That's
Self-control is a part of the fruit of the spirit. It's the hardest one for me
yes.
and for most people. You got to learn how to control yourself, even when the situation isn't good.
That's a whole
And because
sermon.
we don't, that's why we have so many deaths and different people doing different things to other people because we cannot control ourselves based on what somebody else does.
That's right. That is so true. My pastor says this all the time. You know, what happens to you, you can't control. What you can control is how you respond. And that's so
Absolutely,
important that
absolutely,
we take in
absolutely.
that mentality. So I want to do this. I want to start to give some advice, some resources to people that may find themselves in a situation that they never thought they'd be in. For the most part, I don't really know anybody that's been a part of an abusive relationship, assaultive relationship, mentally, physically, emotionally, that was their desire when they got into it. So, what do you say to people that find themselves in that cycle, and they believe that the other person, either I can make them better, or I can't make it without them, which is a codependency? How do we start to get people, or what advice would you give to folks? And anybody can take this one as a first step. What is the first step that you should take when you're in those situations?
Well, I think the first step should be you seeking therapy.
Mhm.
First and foremost, seek therapy. For you to say, I can't live without this person,
Mhm.
then that means that you're not being good to yourself. You're not valuing yourself.
Mhm.
You need you first before you need this other person.
Yes.
So, therapy will help you to understand who you are what your values are, what your beliefs are, which thoughts and beliefs you need to change, so then you can therefore change your behavior. It's hard for them, or all of us, it's hard for us to change our actions if we don't really understand why we're doing this and what benefit is it to take us to our next level, as you
Right.
said. Hmm.
So Dana, let me do this because I can imagine someone listening is probably like, why are we focusing so much on the person that's abused getting the help? Isn't the abuser the one that needs to get the help? And I would opine that absolutely they do. But the healing that you need to have for you, not to make that a part of what's normal to you or normalizing being mistreated. That's why we're talking about therapy so much for the person that's been abused. Because, and Dr. Tucker, I think you pointed it out. Sometimes the abused will become the abuser if they don't get help. So to break these cycles, it's important to do self-examination, get healed, because we got a lot of broken people and traumatized people out trying to date right now. Um, Janelle, Jennifer, what
You know what? I was
what do
just
you do?
sitting
What do
back
you do
here
to get
because
yourself ready? Go ahead, Jennifer.
She's
I
dropping
was
that.
listening to Dr. Tucker and everything she said I concur with.
Mhm.
Um, I never even heard the term narcissist until this happened to me.
Okay.
So that's what made me do the research. But I'm going to take it back to the basics.
Hmm.
So for me, I made a conscious decision to look at me.
Okay.
I asked myself, God,
Hmm.
why do I keep getting with the same spirit of a man? Because everything is a spirit.
Yes.
And God took me back to something that happened to me in my
Mhm.
childhood. And
Okay.
I worked on me. Like
Yeah.
this man, and I just finished the whole court processing, the sentencing and everything.
Okay.
The only thing he said on that witness stand was, this is not my character. He never apologized or anything like that. And so I mentally had to come to a place,
Hmm.
if this man never apologizes, what am I going to do? I
Right.
had to focus on me and get me together. I couldn't worry about, yes, he needs help, but sometimes people tell themselves so many lies, they begin to believe their lies.
Hmm.
And sometimes even the therapy may
Hmm.
not even help, but it all goes back to a personal conscious choice.
Yes.
So the healing can only take place until you focus on you. So
Yeah.
once I decided to make that choice and focus on me and my healing and the choices that I made,
Hmm.
because again, Dr. Tucker said it's part of it is my personal choice.
Right.
When I did that, God showed me so many situations of where I settled in my entire life. And it wasn't just men relationships, it
Hmm.
was church,
Oh.
ministry, it was friendships, it was work, it was everything where I settled in the choices that I made because of something that happened. And it goes back to the trauma, as
Hmm.
what you guys were talking about in my childhood. So I had to look at me
Hmm.
and focus on me. So that's the advice I would give.
Yes.
Focus on you and get you together, because
Right.
that's when only the healing is going to truly take place.
And is it safe to say that when you're focusing on you, you're not blaming yourself for being the abused, but you are starting to lift yourself to understand that you deserve better? Is that fair to say?
It is. Absolutely. And I had to forgive. There's an exercise that I do with my clients. It's called the forgiveness letter. So
Okay.
I have them write a forgiveness letter to themselves, because there are some things that happened to me that was out of my control. That was in my childhood. I didn't have no control over that. So I had to forgive the
Hmm.
adults who were over my care at that time. And then I also had to forgive myself. So that is very safe to say. Everything is not your fault, because I wasn't in control when I was 8 years old, seven
Right.
years old. So absolutely, that is safe to say that.
So I
So
want to
I'll
do
jump.
this. Oh, no, please go ahead. Please go ahead,
It's
Janelle.
okay. I'll jump in and say exactly what Dana, Monique, and Jennifer said. The first thing I did was sought therapy for myself.
Okay.
Even though my abuser wanted to force me to focus on fixing the marriage, I
Hmm.
chose not to, because it was about me looking inward. And as I began to look inward, my therapist gave me a narcissist checklist.
Okay.
Out of all those things that was on the checklist, there was only one box that wasn't unchecked. And I said, oh my God,
Hmm.
I am dealing with a narcissistic human being.
Right.
But even in that, I saw some traits of my own
Hmm.
being narcissist too.
Okay.
But those that got to the point of abuse,
Hmm.
where the person felt like, well, I'm not punching you, I'm not kicking you, I'm not body slamming you, but I may choke you, I may grab you from or hit you from behind, or I may even hit you with objects.
Hmm.
In
Hmm.
that person's mind, they didn't think that that was abuse. I
Mm.
think, Dr. Tucker, you mentioned it one time when someone calls you out your name, you in a situation of verbal abuse.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
whether you go back and forth with that person or not, verbal abuse is verbal abuse.
It
No,
is.
no one weighs heavier than the other. It still is an abusive situation. Then
Oh,
I called the domestic national hotline to
yes.
get some more encouragement and some more information and some more strength. I think I asked for it to be posted, but it's 1-800-799-SAFE.
1-800-799-SAFE.
Safe.
Can you repeat that one more time?
1-800-799-SAFE. SAFE is 7233. I did
And
all these things in secret because I didn't want to agitate or aggravate my abuser. But I
yes.
wanted to get information on how do I get help for myself, for my children,
Yes.
and what do I do next because I didn't have a roadmap. I didn't
That,
have a person to say, do this first, do that first, but that's why I'm here now because I want to be able to help others through my testimony to give them a roadmap to let them know they're not alone. There's a lot of people that are probably listening to this podcast and they're in situations right now and they don't know where to go or where to turn. But you are so gracious to have four people who have all experienced it from different levels and have different knowledge bases on your podcast. And I hope you keep this post up and do not delete it
it's not going down.
because it's a reference tool for people to go back to and refer to hear our stories of testimony as triumph.
Absolutely.
And even going through a smearing campaign. Oh, yeah, your abuser will twist and manipulate
Oh,
that
yes.
story as if it was you and you did it to yourself. You
Absolutely.
did not. You're not insecure. And
That's
I'm
right.
talking to people. You're not weak.
Yes.
You're not uncommon. You're
Mhm.
not foreign. You are yet an individual who deserves to be respected and
Absolutely.
protected. And it starts with self awareness, self esteem, self confidence. Those are the three selves that can't nobody break.
Absolutely. My God, what a powerful, powerful word. So I want to do this. We're coming to the close. So I want to give each of you a minute to give some closing remarks. And if there's some resources that you want to share, we're going to start with therapist Dana Bell. Then we'll go to Dr. Tucker. Give us about a minute, just some advice or some resources we need to look for to help our
Well, Janelle just gave the number to the national hotline. That's a very good resource to use. They do have privacy um, barriers just for in case that person is being watched or their
yes.
network is being monitored.
Mhm.
Um, Also, they can call us at Family Matters, or they can go to my Instagram page. I have a ebook on domestic violence.
Okay.
It's giving like 10 uncommon comments in regards or tips in regards to domestic violence. And I
Okay.
think it's a good read, simple, easy read. I would also like to say that help them to understand the male and the female both
Yes.
would need therapy, not just the female, but the abuser. Not let me say the male, but the abuser.
Yes. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Dr. Tucker.
So I would just like to add that Dana and I are starting a group, a domestic violence group called Powerless Powerful. She just
Okay.
gave her information where you can inbox her. You can also inbox me at Monique Tucker on Facebook. You can find me at on Instagram at Proverbs Tucker.
Okay.
And my thing is that if and it's for male and women, right? So I don't want you to think that it's just for females, but it's for men and women. And we would like to, if you can leave us your name, your availability, your email, and then if you prefer virtual or in person, those four things. So your name, your email, your availability, virtual or in person. And we want to just open this up because it's like we said, like she said, it's not just Michigan, it's just not different cities, it is
Right.
global and it is
Yes.
needed. And so if you are interested and want to start getting help, then this is where you can start at with people who are like you.
Yes.
Going through the same situation that you're in. For me, when we're talking about what's the first thing and what can you do, I am all about self. I,
Yes.
I believe if you start with yourself, I have a saying that first love yourself.
Yes.
If you
Absolutely.
love you, you're going to sit and you're going to ask yourself questions. And what helped me get out of my domestic violence situations is that I began to have a relationship with God, and God told me who I was because
Right.
they started to tell me who I was, but that's who
Yes.
I wasn't. That was a lie, right? So I
Yes.
understood who I was based on who He told me I was, what I was created to do. Thus,
Yes.
that's why I'm here right now. So I know I have a calling on my life. And when you say, "Are you a spiritual therapist?" I am a spiritual person. I'm a born again Christian. So at the end of the day, the word comes through, whether it's from the scripture, if I gave you the scripture, or it's just from the principle. But
Right.
it's no way I can give you what I need to give you without the word, right?
That's
Because
right.
that is our foundation. And if we can get an understanding that we have to love ourselves and understand why we were created, then
Yes.
that's how we get out of these situations that we in. If we understand who we are, we can get out of these situations that we're in. So I would just encourage you, if you know somebody who needs this or who you think would like it, please let them know. Give them our inbox, our numbers, that so that we can help. So we can help the community because it's our job as disciples
Yes.
to
Absolutely.
heal.
Absolutely. I
Yes.
want to thank the four of you so much. I've learned so much. I'm just humbled. You are definitely my sheroes. And I just pray God's choice blessings on each one of you as we all go into our different ways to have impact on somebody's life. And I would encourage those that are watching that if you know someone that is a victim, uh, don't just say it's not my business. When they're grown, I'm gonna stay out of grown folks' business. I can't tell you the number of funerals I've attended, I've officiated, I've done eulogies, or I've responded as my official capacity in the police department of people that were at the funeral and said, I knew this was going to happen. I saw this coming. Um, each one teach one, each one reach one. I
Absolutely.
pray for every person out there that may be in a domestic violence situation. There is help for you. And please don't hesitate to reach out and get that help. But if you know somebody that's in that situation, please offer them some resources, offer them some help, a place to stay, a safe path to get away, help them plan to get out. But you may very well save somebody's life. So this has been Chiefs Chat with Ralph Godbee with therapist Dana Bell, Dr. Tucker, Monique Tucker, Janelle Thomas, and Jennifer Wilson. Please hear the wise words that they have given. God bless you all. See you in a couple of weeks. We're going to do this again with some more dynamic guests. God bless you. Thank you, ladies. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
God
Thank you.
bless.
Bye, everyone.
God bless you,
Take care.
everyone.